Brigitte, come back. You had a series of answers to questions that you wanted to flick through.
Yes, correct. I've invited Scott back to speak specifically to fire stations and community corrections facilities in residential areas within the 4 AVs. That was a question that wasn't specifically answered the other day.
Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. The enablement of emergency services facilities arose out of the phase 1, or shall we say stage 1 residential chapter hearings that have, as I said, I think last time I spoke to you, I indicated that they had closed last Friday. They were enabled as part of a Crown submission that sought that essentially service stations and ambulance stations be enabled throughout the flatland zones. That was in response to, or that was backed up through the stage 1 strategic directions decision that set policy 3.3.13, where it relates to emergency services and public safety. And that policy, which is now operative, or objective, sorry, that is now operative, reads recovery and provision for comprehensive emergency services throughout the city, including the necessary access to properties and the water required for firefighting. Now they are in the copy of the rules before the hearings panel at the moment, and I stress these are only before the hearings panel, but the hearings has finished. They are a permitted activity. Now this relates to the new strategies on behalf of the fire service and the St John's ambulance service, where the fire service is looking to establish 2 new fire stations in the flatland zones in areas that will give access, that will complete a comprehensive access of fire services or fire response times across the flatlands. And then, although I note that, of course, there is now the new emergency and services facilities being built inside the 4 avenues at the moment. In hindsight, I'd question whether or not these need to be enabled inside the 4 avenues at this stage, given that those stations are being constructed. I'd suggest at this stage, at least in the version that goes to of phase 2 zones, phase 3 that goes to the Minister for comments, that that enablement of emergency services facilities not included. In terms of community corrections facilities, this is once again enabled through, or was enabled or sought through the Crown submission. Now, I'd like to, and that relates back to the now operative objective that I read to the council a couple of days ago. That was the objective 3.3.11, where it relates to the expedited recovery and establishment of community facilities and education activities to meet the needs of the community. Along with that, before the hearings panel came a new definition, or about, while it was covered in the community facility definition loosely, a more direct, or what we might refer to as a belt and braces definition of community corrections facility was included. And I'll read that out. It means a building used for administrative and non-custodial services. Services may include probation, rehabilitation, reintegration services, assessments, reporting, workshops and programs. And offices may be used for the administration of and a meeting point for community working groups. So I'd like to stress that, and in the discussions that I had with the with the Crown's planning consultants on this matter, they stressed quite strenuously that this was non-custodial. When I questioned them about matters such as periodic detention or periodic detention centres, they said that they weren't included because they did not fall within the definition of non-custodial services. I think that the activity status within the 4 avenues is still, in my view, warranted. As it's been described to me by the Crown's planning consultants, that the buildings themselves would be outwardly like any other non-residential activity within a residential building. And so when they were drafted in, as I said, when they were drafted in, I was mindful of what was coming out of the hearings panel. But as I said, in hindsight, I don't think the emergency services, I don't think that the emergency services facilities permitted activity is required because of the access that the facilities inside the new facilities inside the 4 avenues will give. But I'm certainly still of the opinion that the community corrections facilities, given their size and nature, are appropriate.
So, was that definition change brought to our attention?
Which definition
around
change?
Community facilities, including corrections centres?
Though that came out of the stage 1 hearings.
And did we accept that as a council?
I accepted it as in terms of my role through responding to mediation.
But I don't recall us ever being asked for a direction on that.
But you're not necessarily, once the submissions have closed and the further submissions, the council no longer has a further role. Then it goes to the hearings panel for their processes, as part of the processes before actual hearings occur, and sometimes during hearings, there are mediations with various parties. And as a professional, we are required to attend those mediations. And,
but you do come back to us and check with us. That's what the purpose of the, the sort of 2-hour meetings has been, is to just flick through things that. But that, as I understand it, that isn't always possible on a timing basis.
That's correct.
But where possible, you do come back.
Yes, but when you're in mediations, decisions have to be made there and then.
That's why we've had meetings scheduled every Wednesday and every Friday.
Yes, yes.
So I just want to understand. So basically what you're saying is the stage 1 hearings, community facilities, which can go into residential areas as permitted activities? With no notification? Or is there
That's the community corrections facilities and the community.
But we've just heard that doesn't include PD centres.
Right. That's right.
So I actually took comfort from what we were just told. I'm not concerned about it at all.
Well, then just help me understand the difference between a PD centre and a community or a corrections centre. Like, what's a corrections centre in the modern day use? Because I've never heard the distinction before, in fact.
Well, probably like Salisbury Street Foundation or like a probation office where you go and sign on.
That is exactly how it's been described.
Or where the probation officers work from.
That's how it has been described to me, yes. It's
Right.
not.
But
it's
a PD centre
non-custodial.
is different. That's where people turn up for periodic detention and essentially sent out on work gangs. And those ones are not appropriate for residential areas. They need to be on high-profile streets with nothing to hang around to do.
Because they're in custody for that period of time.
Well, they are technically in custody.
Correct. In preparing for this morning, I also I checked the Department of Corrections website for the description of periodic detention as well, and it is very much as the Mayor described it. It is also a custodial sentence, and it's very clear in the definition that it is non-custodial services.
People go to a
Yes,
You just don't have work gangs.
that's correct.
Right.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Periodic detention work gangs, yes.
yeah. So there'll still be services, there'll still be courses. I mean, did you look back at like Stanmore Road and Ensworth Road and see the level of concern?
Yeah, Ensworth Road was an appropriate location. Stanmore Road wasn't. So, and that's the trouble is that there isn't an easy way to describe these things.
We lost in the
because
High Court.
technically, it's an issue around
Balance.
notification.
So
Andrew?
balancing the need to provide for these services, the rather directive nature of the objective in stage one, and the statement of expectations in terms of simplicity, if you like. On balance, I found that this was the best way to address the matter, while addressing probably the higher end of the community concerns around periodic detention centres by not enabling them.
So the old Peterborough site that was non-residential was a PD centre, is that right? So the one that corrections had in the central city.
I don't know, but we can come back to you with any of that historic information to do with resource consents.
But so they currently have a site in the central city that's in a non-residential area.
Who does, sorry?
The
Corrections.
corrections. As I understand, they had a PD centre in Peterborough Street that didn't cause any angst, any harm, and it was fine. But I don't understand why we'd allow that to then go into a residential area.
Yanni, I've said,
I heard what you said about the fire station and those services being done.
in terms of the definition, it's quite clear from the definition that non-custodial services are not enabled. Oh, sorry, that custodial services are not enabled. The definition specifically says, and does not include, sorry, I'll read it out again. Means a building used for administrative and non-custodial services. Now, periodic detention centres, as they've been described to me by the Department of Corrections planners, are a custodial centre.
Andrew and then Phil.
Thank
Can I just have Andrew then Phil?
Yeah, great, thank you. Just to clarify one thing that seems to be a little bit of a disconnect to me. We've just had a conversation about a place where work gangs gather, which this is not, and that those type of work gangs been seen as a temporary custodial period. Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in your original outline was a meeting place for community work programmes, or words to that effect, and that is included in the definition that we're talking about. So I'm just keen to know what the difference is between a place where work gangs gather that's considered a temporary custodial period and a meeting place for community work programmes, which presumably people don't turn up at voluntarily.
As I understand it, from the Department of Corrections website, once again, that under work, community work sentences, an individual is set an amount of community work that they have to undertake. They're not compelled as to when they undertake it. They have a set timetable over which they, in a number of hours that they need to meet. And that they are not compelled to turn up, as I understand it, to turn up to the meeting point, if you like, at any one particular time. They can go to their they can go and collect materials. They can come and go as they want. If they're working with others, they can meet with others there. So in that sense, it's non-custodial.
So that's a community work sentence. So
community work groups. Yes.
Community work groups. And what's the difference between a community work group and what was described as a work gang, which was considered custodial?
I think what
I'm
Scott has
just
just said is that, from what I understand Scott has just said, is that in a PD centre, all of the people that are on the periodic detention work group have to arrive at the PD centre. They are looked after by whoever is an authority at that PD centre, and that person is with them until they go off site and then they come back. So they are there on site. Whereas the community work groups, it sounds to me like they could have an arrangement. It might be one person, it might be several people. Say perhaps their community work was to erase graffiti or something like that. They can meet at the site. There is not that need for somebody to be looking over their shoulder the whole time. They just have to register the hours that they're working.
All right, thank you.
All right, Phil?
Well, Bridget sort of answered what I was going to say as a former probation officer, actually. But and look, the other point I'd make too is that since the big, huge, I guess, community conflicts over the siting of these locations and the processes that were used by corrections, there's no doubt in my mind now that corrections have an approach, certainly in this city, whereby they certainly approach the community board. They did in our case, and who would know that in fact one of their PD centres is over at Annex Road. And exactly. So I think the processes are much better now, and I was quite satisfied with the definitions and how it might work.
Yeah, no, it sounds much better. And I mean, the Pages Road site, it's the complete opposite of the experience down the other end. In the Pages Road site, originally corrections wanted to locate their PD centre in Hampshire Street. And the local community said no. I mean, it's inappropriate. There was a bar there at the time. There was, there were all sorts of reasons why people would hang around afterwards, and that's actually the problem. Off a main street, no visibility, and actually a concern to the whole community, and justifiably so. So we went looking for an alternative site. Tragically, it wasn't very good ground, and the department and the PD centre's been completely destroyed. But the point that I was going to make was that the complete difference there, the local residents association leafleted the entire neighbourhood with a positive message about what it would mean for the community and how it could be made to be safe, and how they could do work in the community for the community. So a completely different approach. Very positive, very upfront, and no secrets or anything like that. So I agree that corrections have not handled it well in the past, but this approach was completely the opposite. The Bexley Residents Association, where I happen to live as well, I was a member of the association, the Bexley Residents Association was invited to the morning tea for the opening. Completely different approach. So, I think that the type of collaboration with local residents associations, local community boards, and the community board were there as well. So everyone was positive about it, and it all started with them choosing the wrong site. So it just does show that they're not appropriate for tucked away residential communities where there are reasons for people to hang around and stay, but they are appropriate on very visible main roads, even though there are neighbours around, if you approach it in the right way. So, but the decision's been made in terms of the definition.
The decision hasn't been released.
The definition is before the hearings panel.
But it sounds as if everyone's in agreement that that's an appropriate set of words.
That's correct.
Right.
So I just looked at the corrections website. There is not a single mention of PD centres anymore. Everything is called community corrections. So let's not fool ourselves. I think this is semantics, and this is a way of getting things in. So you can just look on their website and find a PD centre in Christchurch. There is none. They're all called community corrections centres, and none of them are in a residential area. Not a single one is in a residential zone, as I understand it from looking at that list. So why would we allow them to go into a residential area in the central city?
Yanni, could I ask you to Google periodic detention and
just look at the corrections website.
Department of Corrections.
Anyway, the thing is that a question was asked. The question has been answered. Can we move on to the next question?
Well, do we want feedback? I mean, how do we
No,
make
there's
a decision
nothing.
on
There's nothing to feedback. We've been advised what the situation is. That's what we asked
the decision,
for.
as I understand that we have to make, is whether we support PD centres and community corrections going into a residential
No,
area.
we don't. We've just heard. Are you saying that you are not accepting the advice that we've just received from staff that PD centres are not included?
No. This is for the stage 1 definitions. There's been stuff done, and for the non-central city, there's been decisions that will be made. What we're being asked for in terms of our notified district plan.
Oh, so are you saying that the definition for every other part of the plan will be different from the one we've just had described? Is that what we're being told?
What I'm saying is that we've got a decision to make around PD centres and community correction facilities.
No, we haven't. We haven't been asked to make a decision about PD centres.
We're doing the Central City chapter.
Not about PD centres? No. We've just heard that the definition doesn't include detention.
The question was relating to fire stations and community corrections facilities as permitted activities in residential areas in the city centre. That was the question.
Right.
And you wanted to understand what that meant.
Because there's not a single one that's in a residential neighbourhood area zone at the moment.
You are referring to PD centres?
No, I'm referring to community corrections.
All right. So, well, you can vote against it, that's fine. So can we move on to the next question? We're not doing it now. We're just dealing with the questions, and then we've got the resolutions for City Centre, the Flatland, the Cranford Basin, coastal environment.
Do you have an agenda? The agenda was
If you have the agenda in front of you, it lists what we're doing. So now we'll move on to the next question.